Thank you everyone for coming today to the AIOG Career Seminar Series, or as we've rebranded, Beyond the PhD. We're excited to have Hank Hrdlicka here today. Him and I were in graduate school together at the University of Connecticut, and now we've both since moved on to different positions, and I'm very excited to hear what Hank's been up to. I didn't create a PowerPoint slide to tell you about upcoming events, but I'm putting a link in the chat to forward you to our website to check the website out for upcoming career events. And we'll have a workshop in this coming fall, and our networking event, which unfortunately needed to be postponed, will also be in the fall. So check out the website for, like I said, upcoming events and activities. We're going to have a series over the summer of our office hours. If you have a CV or resume that you would like one of us to review with you, we're going to have that posted for you to sign up for times. And yeah, so I think without further ado, I will hand it over to Hank to tell us about his position and where he's been, where he's going. So,
alrighty.
Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you, Britt. Again, my name is Hank Hrdlicka. I'm from the UCONN Health class of 2020, as Britt kindly mentioned. And I was asked today to kind of give my background, to share my experiences in going from a PhD to now being a certified clinical research coordinator. And to begin, I felt it best to give a background of who I am and where I'm from. So I'm originally from eastern Nebraska, from a small town called Wahoo. There I spent many years working through high school and partly through college, working for a seed company called Syngenta, my dad's construction company. And starting in spring 2010, I graduated from Wahoo Public High School in spring 2010, and then began attending Nebraska Wesleyan that fall. At Nebraska Wesleyan, I ended up getting a biochemistry and molecular biology bachelor's. While there, I was the president of the graduate school club for 3 years and was also a resident assistant for 3 years. During my undergrad, I also was part of the Nebraska INBRE program, which is a competitive 2-year research internship. And without going into too much detail about my undergrad experiences, because I know that's not the focus, without knowing exactly where I wanted to go or what I wanted to get into, my undergrad experiences led me to graduate school. At the time, the opportunities seemed and continued to seem and continue to be endless. Graduate school, I ended up joining the UCONN Health Biomedical Science PhD program in fall 2014. After my 3 rotations, I joined the lab of Dr. Ann Delaney in the Skeletal Biology and Regeneration AOC. And 6 years later, I defended my doctoral dissertation, microRNA 29 family, a positive regulator of osteoclastogenesis, in July 2020. And so during my graduate years, in addition to the numerous technical experiences, it taught me a lot of important lessons that I felt I wanted to share with everyone today. When you're going, I'm not sure in the audience if who's all just starting out or who may be in the rotations or where you're at, and even beyond, I would very much implore everyone to focus on the mentor more than the research. No matter if it's in graduate school or in your jobs after, your mentor needs to be someone who will work well with you and who you work well with and who will help you grow. And at any level, remembering your mental health is very important. You should remember always that your self-worth isn't defined by your results. When an experiment goes bad or goes poorly, that's just science. There's a reason why research starts with re. And also maintaining a work-life balance is important in school and after. You will always do better for it. That's something that have learned along the way for sure. Be honest with yourself. I know it's controversial, but if you find a lab, mentor, research, or even a PhD isn't for you, that's okay. There are plenty of options. And because being in a graduate program, you begin to build a ton of transferable skills at the bench and away from the bench. And these skills shouldn't be taken for granted. They're extremely invaluable when you start job hunting. And some of you may be asking right now, what are transferable skills? In my experience, in my my top three transferable skills ended up being communication, writing, and project planning and management. As a graduate student, it's my thought and my belief that everyone who comes from a PhD or even a master's should have some level of transferable skills or some skills in these three areas. Think of, for communication, all the times that you have to present your data and your work at a RIP talk, research and progress talk, journal clubs, data lab or data meetings in lab. In writing, you are writing all the time, whether that be for your qualifying exam, your dissertation, if you get the opportunity to write papers in lab. It's just something you're always going to be doing. And it's something that the more you do it, the more competent you're going to become and the more confident you'll become. And project planning and management. So in order to run an experiment, you have to be able to plan it out. You have to be able to manage it. You have to be able to know where the stops and starts are. And I think it's something that you don't necessarily pick up on while you're in the thick of it. But I think it's something that everyone will walk away with. In addition to that, organization, task prioritization, and problem solving and creativity, I think are three more very important transferable skills that you may not recognize in the moment. In order to keep your projects and your research and everything on track, you're going to need to stay organized. There's just no question about it. And the organization skills that you build will help you go on and be able to transfer those skills to any career that you go to after. Task prioritization. Everyone will reach a moment where your to-do list is 2 pages long and everything's a priority, which means nothing's a priority. But that just means that you have to be able to triage and learn which ones need to get done first, for sure. And then problem solving and creativity. I think everyone, to a certain extent, is going to be able to walk away with thinking out with, I guess it'd be maybe more appropriate to say, being able to think outside the box. I think that in order to do anything, anytime you're faced with any problem or issue, just being able to think outside the box is going to be a huge plus. And I think, in the PhD, that's something that we all build. Operating both independently and as a team, which I think all of us, or everyone who's gone through graduate school, has experienced both being independent and as being part of a team, whether that's a large experiment that you're working between 4 different people trying to accomplish in a timely manner, or you're running, a large experiment on yourself, and you have to lean on your organization and task prioritization and project planning and management skills. Mentorship skills are also important, and this may be more in line with working as a team, but being able to pass on the knowledge that you gain through either mentorship or just with passing it from coworker to coworker. As you go, as you progress in lab, you go from being the junior in lab to the senior in lab. That's just how things happen. So you need to be able to transfer that skills and knowledge to the people who come after you. And then maybe a bit more of a funnier one, but in my experience, being able to use Microsoft Office suites and statistics programs, if you're able to use those in any context, it's going to be a plus. You use Microsoft Office more than you'll ever know when you leave grad school. And depending on where you go, if you have any experience with stats programs, it's going to be a huge plus. Excuse me. So I finished the PhD or I defended my PhD in July 2020. And so how did I start my career search? So for me, I very early on sought fields that would build upon my particular strengths and interests. And some of these career options, after doing some research into it, included academic advising, education-based postdocs. They do exist. Instructorships, lab management, coordination, scientific writing. And so for me, the aspects of the PhD that I had always found a lot of pleasure in was the mentorship aspect. And so I wanted to the mentorship and organization aspect. So when I started looking for fields, I tried to find fields or positions that I could lean on that. Or I also, in the end, I also very much enjoyed writing. So I also started looking at scientific writing as an option. So when I started my search, I very early on, again, contacted the UCONN Career Center. They were very helpful with assisting me with my resume and CVs and personalized cover letters. It also sounds like AIOG does that now too, which is fantastic. And, when you do work with any career center or anyone to help start building out your CV and resumes, I highly recommend sending an example job description that's just going to be able to help whoever's helping you cater your resume or CV to that field. So when I finally felt that I was ready to apply, I started posting my CV and resume on the appropriate platform. For me, that looked like LinkedIn, Indeed, Higher Ed Jobs, the Chronicle of Higher Education, and also State of Connecticut job forums for UCONN positions. There are no right or wrong places. You just need to put yourself out there. If you don't apply, you're never going to know if you would have had a chance to get there. And with applying, I highly recommend submitting a personalized cover letter. I've been on a very little bit, but I've been on the other end of the hiring process now. And it is something that helps put people a step above. So, even if it's just a short note, just, not everyone's going to do it. So if you do it, it's going to stand out. One thing from my experiences with the interviewing process, even if you don't think you would take a job, it never hurts to interview, especially when you're first starting out and getting comfortable. Getting comfortable during the interviews, and the whole interview process is very important. And find the strategies that work for you during your interview process, and just be confident in what you have to bring to the table. Make sure to do your homework and know the company and who you are interviewing. So knowing the hiring manager, whether or not it's a hiring manager, someone in HR, if you'll be talking directly to who your potential boss will be, just getting some sense. That way you can have some preparation for it. And with this, during this time, be ready to say, I don't know. In science, we're taught if you don't know the answer, don't make something up, just say you don't know. I think in my experience, anyone that's interviewing you will appreciate that. But that also kind of leans into the doing your homework. You feel comfortable in saying you don't know, but you also need to be prepared to a certain extent as well. And so my experience in the job hiring process or job seeking process, I started working with the UCONN Career Center about 10 months to starting my career search. So I finished, so about 10 months. So I started applying during April 2020 during the lockdown, and was sending in applications in between writing my dissertation. And so then I defended my dissertation that July. And then I'm happy to say, after submitting 100 plus applications, I applied to my current position in August of 2020, interviewed the 28th, and was offered the position early September. So I have to say with that, every company is going to be a little bit different on their turnaround. My current employer that I'll talk about here in a moment, their philosophy is if they like you, they're going to interview you as quick as possible, just so that way you don't get scooped up by another company. Not all companies are going to be like that. And so lessons from my applying and interviewing experiences, if you know you want to shift away from academic or industry research, I would really recommend starting to plan early. And maybe that should just be start planning early, no matter what you want to go into. I found it very beneficial starting to work with the Career Center ahead of time, before I even knew that my dissertation, defending my dissertation and defending my PhD was coming. Like, I just needed to start that process early. Maybe it was born out of anxiety, or it was just born out of, hey, I need to know what I don't know. But then one thing that, if you are planning to shift away from academic or industry research, always take comfort in the fact that bench research or whatever kind of research you're doing can always be your parachute. You've developed an extremely important or extremely specific set of skills in your PhD that are beneficial to the field that you're in. You can always use that as your parachute and help you to, while you search in other fields. And while some people will benefit from networking and connections, sometimes it takes perseverance. So for me, I was shifting to fields that I really didn't know anyone in. I did my best to try to, network via LinkedIn and other platforms. But at the end of the day, it took finding a job description that fit my set of skills and applying. So I know I've alluded to it a bit, but where am I now? So currently I am a clinical research coordinator at Gaylord Specialty Healthcare's Milne Institute for Healthcare Innovation. I'm based in Wallingford, Connecticut. And Gaylord is what is known as a long-term acute care hospital. And it's part of the larger specialty healthcare umbrella. It's anchored by Gaylord Hospital, and we're widely recognized for treating and rehabilitating patients experiencing spinal cord and traumatic brain injuries, pulmonary, cardiac, amputee, stroke, and other medically complex conditions, including acute and post-acute COVID-19. And so my general role as a clinical research coordinator is breaking down the barriers to make research more approachable and less intimidating to those with limited prior experience in research, but a lot of enthusiasm. So a lot of the people I work with are physical and occupational therapists, speech therapists, some nurses, and it's a lot of people who have really good ideas and want to get into research, but then they just need someone to help guide them. So to help guide them, I end up, depending on the person and depending on their experience, I help facilitate all stages of research. So that looks like everything from study, conception, and preparation of the IRB application. So for those who don't know, the IRB, or Institutional Review Board, it's the IACUC for humans. So it's an ethics board that makes sure that all humans as research subjects are treated ethically. I also help with recruitment and data collection, data analysis. That's where the stats program background comes in handy, and manuscript preparation. And also developing and promoting staff education on good research practices. Again, people, a lot of the people that I work with in mentoring don't have that prior research experience. And so they don't know what they don't know. Developing all sorts of different either, operating procedures or educational series or seminars to help get everyone up to speed who's interested. And so I've been at Gaylord now for a year and a half. And in the last year and a half, we've increased the number of research studies from their prior historical yearly average of 6 to 8 to a current count of 14 IRB approved studies and 60 studies overall at some level of completion, or everything ranging from, being in in-depth discussion in just the pre-IRB application planning stages to IRB preparation to running the fully fledged IRB approved study, or on the tail end and doing the write-up. Personally, I'm involved in approximately 26 to 30 studies at this time. In the last year and a half, we've published 3 manuscripts with the 4th under review and 2 others in development. We've worked to establish national and regional collaborations. Currently, we have budding relationships with Yale, Southern Connecticut State University, actually some folks at UCONN Health, but then also abroad with Spalding Cape Cod and Sandwich, Massachusetts, I believe it is, and Spokane, Washington, and Washington, D.C. So we're collaborating with other research or rehabilitation facilities that also do research to try to establish those connections. And I'm happy to say that while in this last year and a half, I've also completed a certification course, so I can officially say I'm a certified clinical research coordinator, which is fun. And there's plenty more on the way. So with that, that's just the general background of where I've come from and where I'm at now. I know that was a little bit shorter than the 40 minutes, but I figured we have plenty of time for questions and conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hank. There's a question in the chat that I will read. Did you have experience in compiling an IRB during your graduate research, or is this something you learned on the job?
Ooh, that is a very good question. So it is something that I learned on the job. I had seen IRB applications during my graduate experiences, but I never had the experience of putting them together myself. Thankfully, was given a very nice template to work with. And funnily enough, I'm actually working with the IRB to hopefully and potentially make some edits to the IRB template that we're using, because a lot of the things that they're looking for also kind of align with some things you might see in a grant. So a lot of it wasn't too out there. I guess it is maybe the way I'll say it.
What role do you play in the publications coming out of Gaylord?
That's a very good question. So currently I, because of my role in the data analysis, the publications or manuscripts that I've been involved with, I've actually have contributed a lot on the back end. So 2 of the studies, there was a lot of data that was already collected, but they had no one to analyze it. So I was able to walk in and help get them sorted. So, but that's not necessarily the case. That's not necessarily going to be the case for all publications or all manuscripts. It just, again, our organization really is leaning on the international, I forget the acronym's full name, but the ICMJE, they have guidelines for authorship. And so that's one, so looking at essentially contribution.
Did you find your job fund? Did your job fund the completion of your certificate? Was there an incentive to complete the certification, pay raise, etc.?
So my job, they did help cover the cost for the certification. But as being an employee, I do get so many, I forget the exact number, but I do get education dollars each year. And so I was able to use that towards the certification. As far as pay raise or other, it didn't, there was no direct incentives. It's just something that I wanted to do.
Very good. I have a question for you. So for someone who's still in their PhD and maybe they haven't, figured or found that motivation to pull themselves out and they're not graduating yet, so they're still in the middle of things. For yourself, when did you find yourself thinking, I'm not going to stay in academia?
Ooh. So I need a moment to ponder on that one. So, it was one, so I guess maybe 2/3 of the way through. If I'm being honest, it was seeing the rat race is the way I'm going to say it. It's the publisher perish. It's having to always be looking towards the next grant, that really, that stress and that it didn't appeal to me. I love research and I love science, but that I could see that, you know, being a PI for my own lab, I could just see that being um, essentially draining the love for me. Um, and it's one of those that, and maybe it wouldn't, but I didn't want to have to go through that. Um,
Mhm.
and so, and then I also, going into grad school, always knew that education and teaching was something that I could see myself doing. So, in at the graduate level, um, but it just, and that is a career in something that I also did apply for in a lot of cases, and just the timing wasn't right. But I do very much enjoy my job now.
Do you feel like that it's accurate to say that you still feel a part of it, even though you're not doing what you were doing before, but that you're still getting fulfillment out of it in this different way?
Yes. Um, yeah, I think that um, yeah, I think that I am getting a lot of out of, fulfillment out of being involved in research and being able to, as I find questions, potentially push some of my own personal projects forward. But being able to mentor and bring other people up has been incredibly fulfilling, um, and something that I very much have enjoyed.
Great. Oh, another question. What is a day in the life of your job look like?
Hmm.
Are there a
Let's
lot of meetings? Do you get to do hands-on research?
So it depends on the day, but in general, let's see, I would say about, depending on the day, it's anywhere from 15 to 25% meetings, sometimes more, sometimes less. Um, and it's usually research updates with other budding PIs or different committees that I'm involved with. And then there's about 25 to 50% has been either data analysis, writing, um, give or take. And then the last 25% has been more the hands-on. While I'm not, so with the hands-on doing the research myself, because of the nature of the research, I'm not technically, so I don't have the technical experience to do a lot of the research that we do. So I work with a lot of, trained physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and they're all, in a lot of the interventions we develop are based around their training. So I'm not a trained occupational therapist or physical therapist. So it would be unethical for me to actually, do the intervention. But there are some retrospective studies that I'm involved with. So it's more going back through doing the data collection and data cleaning to be able to answer whatever the question is, whatever the and try to address the hypothesis. As a research coordinator, one of the big things, and if you ever look at any of the job descriptions, it's patient recruitment. So that's one of the bigger things that I do is for any of the studies that are prospective intervention studies. Whenever we go through the process and identify a potential uh, participant, talking to them, walking them through the informed consent and research authorization and all that.
So piggybacking off of that, for people who might not understand what it really means, how would you describe, at least in your experience, how different clinical research is from bench research? Like, what does it look like?
Hmm, that's a very good question. So it's, I would say in some ways, clinical research, because we're at a hospital, and we're trying to make research as, also try to make it as pragmatic as possible. So taking something that, the therapists are already doing in their day-to-day work and trying to either develop or improve upon um, some sort of exercise or intervention, something that's going to, benefit the patient, benefit the participant, and get to the research subject or get to the research question. I think it can be a bit more chaotic. Um, it's in bench research, when you need more samples, you pull cells out of the freezer, you go to the animal tower and get another cage of mice. In at least in this world of clinical research that I find myself in, we're unfortunately waiting for patients who come to us for medical care or rehabilitation. We look at a lot of our research questions are specifically around post-stroke, post-acute stroke. So, for example, one of the studies that we have is looking at balance, patient balance after an acute stroke, and whether or not balance perturbation. So if you purposely throw a patient off balance, does that improve their balance faster? There's some evidence to say that it might, and there's been prior models in the literature, but we can't recruit another subject until someone with a stroke comes to us. A patient following a stroke. So it's a bit more chaotic in that sense.
Sure.
And then everyone who is an investigator is a full-time clinician at the end of the day. So it's, they're trying to balance their life, and my role is to support their research and support everyone's research as well.
That's a good way to put it. So when you were jumping from academia to this new position, did you find yourself with imposter syndrome? And if you did, how did you tackle it?
Ooh, yes. First and foremost, yes. Imposter syndrome was, it was something that I faced very early on and continue to a certain extent. Anytime I'm faced with something I haven't been experienced with before, or haven't had experience with before. Coming from and dealing with it, it's taking it one day at a time, and being open to letting yourself make mistakes, but not, being open to letting yourself make mistakes, not defining your self-worth by your results or by what you're able to accomplish that day. The things that I live by is every day I do my best, but my best is going to look different each day. In some days, you can be on, you're going to be I'll be in meetings working on things that I know exactly what to do, and I'm able to bang it out real quick and get it done real quick. And there's times where I'm looking at a new statistical, maybe statistical analysis that I've never had experience with, but need to learn. So I teach myself, or I seek out advice from others who know how to do it. But then if at the end of the day with what I'm doing, I'm grateful for the fact that if I do make a mistake, someone isn't going to hurt because I'm not doing the intervention. So there's that nice buffer that I'm on the back as well. Now, if I were with one of our stellar therapists or clinicians, I could never do what they do in a day in my life. I think that answers the question or gets to the answer. So it's just doing your best each day. And I think I'm always going to have imposter syndrome to a certain extent, but the more experience I get, the more comfortable I feel and the more I'm able to take on.
Yes. Yeah, I like that what you said, being okay with making mistakes and knowing that you'll just learn from them. You'll be better for it. We know that that's how that works. Okay. So are there pros and cons to completing graduate school when you're looking for a career outside of academia? How was your PhD? How did your PhD help you in your clinical research endeavors? You did answer some of that during the presentation, but definitely, I think, if you're in grad school right now and you know that you're not going to stay, what are the advantages to staying?
So I think one of the advantages, the advantages of staying would definitely be becoming more well-rounded. I think so. If I did not complete my PhD, so in full transparency, I could in a lot of ways be doing what I'm doing, but I wouldn't have the same level of writing experience, which has been a huge part of my job here, which, you know, if I hadn't gone through the process of writing my dissertation like I did, you know, I don't think I would have become nearly as comfortable with writing as I am. I think continuing, you know, depending at what level you're at or at what stage in your PhD, I think, you know, if it's it's a tricky overall, it's a very tricky question. And I think, well, I want to say like there are pros to staying, there are pros to leaving. I think that's just a very much a personal decision for a lot of people. For me, you know, there were times that I questioned it, but at the end, I knew that I wanted it. I wanted a PhD. I wanted to get to that point, and for that, I am very much well-rounded. I've gotten a lot of experience in, you know, developing good research questions, which I would have had before. So it's a tricky question. I'll leave it at that. And I know that's not the most satisfying answer for someone looking for answers. Um, but it's just, I think it's a very much a personal question. And everyone's will have to come to their own conclusions.
Mhm. Okay. Well, then being on this end of things, now that you're in this role, and that's, but since you didn't know you always wanted to do this because you know, this is something that happened to you after you finished. Knowing what you know now, what are some things you would have done to prepare yourself to gain more experience during graduate school for this career,
Ooh.
if you would have changed anything?
Hmm. That's a very good question. I think the one thing that, and I know, I think I saw Anne come in and she would appreciate this, is I think for me, prioritization wasn't the strongest skill set. It was a skill set that I had begun to develop. Um, and I think it was really coming into this position that um, task prioritization really became of utmost critical importance, I guess. Well, it was always of critical importance in grad school. It just, I didn't quite develop that skill fully. So um, I think that I would have worked or have maybe found ways to build that a bit better or build out that skill set. Um, I think, um, yeah, other than that, there's not much I would have done different. The one, if anything, maybe trying to um, interact and work with some of the docs or clinicians at UCONN Health and just, if not to do research, but to kind of shadow and get some insight into what they do. You know, and being more rounded that way. Because being in the clinical research, like I've been experienced two different medical fields that I would never have imagined. One of them being physiatry, which is, it's a subset, well, it's a type of medical doctor. I know I'm gonna screw this up, but it's essentially rehabilitation medicine at the end of the day. And I had no idea it existed. And, you know, maybe if I had that experience, I could have been a bit more prepared. But yeah, in general, I think I came pretty well prepared.
Good. Can you speak a little bit about work-life balance in your current role as compared to during graduate school or to academic life?
Um, so work-life balance now, you know, it's always it's a constant struggle and a constant thing to achieve for. I think I have better work-life balance now, as in my current role. You know, there from, you know, 8 to 5 usually, sometimes a little earlier, sometimes a little later, but it's really because I'm not actively doing the interventions, I'm not actively, you know, doing the research. I'm again helping with the data analysis. Then there's a lot more opportunity for me to leave at a more consistent time, and kind of leave. You know, it's with any job, it's always it's the struggle of trying to find how to leave work at work. Um, and I think it just in grad school, I had a much harder time leaving work at work. And it was just because the constant, you're constantly doing the experiments. You're in deep in the project planning and management organization and trying to keep things together. There's time points on the weekends. There's cells that need to be taken care of. There's mice that need to be taken care of. It's, it's hard to get everything done in a standard 8 hours. But with the current position, I have the flexibility and ability to leave at set hours if I so wish. There are some days where I have to, stay later and grind something out, but it's not every day. And maybe in some ways, grad school, was the same way where maybe it wasn't every day, but I still feel like I have a bit better balance now.
Good. Question about receiving recognition for your contributions to the studies you help with. Are you listed as co-author? Are you listed in the acknowledgements? Are you invited to present posters, talk, conferences? Yeah, that's the first part of the question. We'll stop there.
Okay. So recognition for my contributions, at least in this current setting, I've been listed as co-author on the 3 studies that I've contributed to. So co-author on 2, I ended up being, after working with the other authors, was asked to be the corresponding author on 1 case report. So that was exciting. And then anything that I contribute to poster wise or that goes to conferences, I've been listed as a co-author. Again, the level of contribution in addition to the work has been a lot. I know speaking with other research coordinators in other facilities and other places, that isn't necessarily always the case as well. I think in most times, you're depending on your level of contribution will dictate how much or what level of recognition. But I think I've been great. I'm grateful that, my contribution has been recognized. I think if I were part of a pharmaceutical company, that might not be the case. In regards to some conversations I've had with other research coordinators. And then as far as being invited to go to conferences, I have been invited or have been asked to go to conferences, albeit virtually this last year and a half because of everything going on in the world. But then going forward, there are some conferences, that we're actually talking about now submitting abstracts for that I would be the author, be the presenting author.
Wow, very cool. What does the advancement promotion structure for this career path look like?
Can you say that again? Sorry.
Like, what is the promotion structure? What's your ladder? Or is this like, yeah, okay.
Got it. So, I think, so at least at Gaylord, it's very much a new position. So it's something that we're still figuring out. Traditionally, being a research coordinator is kind of towards the top of the ladder at the end of the day. You can definitely have like research coordinator, senior research coordinator, stuff like that. But then depending on I think that it may be, I don't want to say it, but truthfully, it is a little capped out depending on the organization. But I know in my particular situation, there will be opportunities for growth and expansion. It's just, I don't quite know what that looks like yet.
Did you apply for other clinical research positions, coordinator positions during your job search?
Yes. Yep. I'd have to go back and look, but I did. I know I applied to research coordinator positions, also research associate, clinical research associate positions. So not to get too far into the weeds, but so you have clinical research coordinator, so who works with a sponsor or a sponsor institution that runs the clinical research or clinical trial. And then the coordinator is kind of a higher level, making sure everything is working smoothly. Clinical research associate works a tier below and will typically do a bit more of the brain work. But in my case, I'm doing a little bit of both roles just because we're a small department.
Are you
Continually
the,
growing.
yeah, are you, oh, no, that makes me wonder, are you part of a team of coordinators or are you the only one?
I'm we are a department of 4 currently. So I work with one clinical research associate, my boss, who is the director of the Milne Institute, and then through a lateral shift, another research coordinator who she's been with Gaylord for 14 years. I don't want to date her, but I think 14 years. But she had been working on a different subset of projects that were kind of separate, but then it made sense having the horizontal shift to come into the Milne Institute.
Do you finding other clinical research coordinators have a diverse background of educational and research experience? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So could you talk a little bit like that? Or do you feel like you're like the only one that made this transition, or you're rare, or, just.
I'd say about, from the ones I've talked to and the ones who I've met, I'd say about 50-50. You know, I've interacted mostly via email with other research coordinators who have a PhD background. I've met and interacted with others who've had both a bachelor's or a master's background. And from what I understand, the bachelor's and master's background, there was a bit more on the job training. I was fortunate that with the PhD background, I actually was kind of, maybe going to your prior question of being prepared, was able to kind of jump in and was able to kind of hit the ground running in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
sure.
yeah.
Nice. What do you love most about your job?
Interacting with the interactions I have with the different clinicians. It's that mentorship aspect that always gets me a little bit of someone who hasn't done any research or has only peripherally interacted or been involved with a study before, then coming forward with, like, I have this idea, can you help me make it happen, or help me, how do I go about this? Or some folks who've had been, for one of the manuscripts, of they've done the data collection and they don't quite know how to write a manuscript, and so they're considering working with an outside medical writer, but we have that ability in-house, and we're able to kind of go through the process and make it more of a learning moment for everyone. A lot of the folks or the papers, the manuscripts I've been involved with, it was the first manuscript for a lot of those folks. Hadn't been involved in the writing process at all before, and we're able to go through it step by step. And so what exactly does peer review, to the level of what is peer review, and just being able to have that educational moment. What do you mean we have to write a rebuttal to all these somewhat nasty comments?
Wow.
Yeah.
That's really cool. You're like bridging that gap for people and using your experience to help them do something that they didn't do before, but is really important for their field to have these studies. And that's really amazing. You're like the bridge. That's awesome.
I think so too.
Yeah. How cool. What do you like least about your job? Because of course you should ask both ends.
You should always ask both ends. Because we are a small department that's continuing to grow, I have to, at the end of the day, have to wear a lot of hats. And while I don't mind wearing the different hats, it does bog me down from time to time. And I forget who I was talking to recently, but the analogy, that I want to use is, think about putting together 5 puzzles all at once. All the pieces are mixed up and you're trying to bounce between them and get them done all about the same time. So sometimes it just that can kind of bog me down. And yeah, and then again, that's really where leaning into some of the transferable skills I learned in graduate school and have developed since really has come in handy. But yeah, I'd say just the multitude of tasks that I have to do sometimes can be a little boggy.
Sure. 5 puzzles. Yeah. Okay, so I think unless anyone has any last minute questions for the chat, I think we should wrap up. And I would really like, Hank, if you had a piece of advice or something you would like, wisdom you'd like to impose on our participants today. Do you have something that you can leave them with for motivation?
I want to go back to something I said earlier. Do your best every day, no matter what that looks like that day. Strive to do your best, and just don't be afraid. If you don't be afraid to make mistakes. Strive to do your best, no matter what it looks like that day. And yeah, and then last but not least, ask a lot of questions. Never stop asking questions. Always be in pursuit of new information, new knowledge, and try to find those answers. So
Wonderful.
maybe that's not the most uplifting thing, but it's what I got.
No, it's good. It's good. We should all just remember to take it one day at a time and not have too high of expectations for ourselves every day.
Exactly.
Well, thanks, Hank, so much for coming and sharing your story and your journey with us today. I think it was really helpful. We've never had this position before on our seminar series, so it's really good to hear in this and to hear about your transition and your thought process. And thank you for all the helpful tips of how you applied, the career seminar. Again, it was UCONN's career seminar. Is that what it was? Center?
UCONN Career Center. Yep.
Okay. And you just found them online and found the resources, and you set like up meetings and things, or that's how?
Yeah. So I guess my first interactions with the UCONN Career Center were pre-pandemic. And so they did on-site resume reviews. So you'd come in and I think it was K Kimball Gruber from the UCONN Career Center, who had come to UCONN Health. I checked recently. I think she's still with the Career Center. She was a great resource. But everyone I ended up interacting with in the Career Center was very helpful. So I would highly recommend that resource to everyone.
Great. Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you again. And I think we will stop recording.